Thanks everybody for joining us today for the Stewardship Hour. Today we're going to be focusing on sustainable gardening, what we can do as individuals and as a community. Really quickly before we get started though, I'd like to, just in case anybody hasn't been here before to the Stewardship Hour, I'll speak a little bit about what that is first. I'm Emma Zarin Newman. I'm a volunteer with the Clean County Commission, and this is something that we do every other month. We come together on Zoom. We invite one or more people from the community who are experts on a particular subject to come and talk with us a little bit about that topic. This topic this month, for example, is sustainable gardening. So we have the lovely Judith Alberts here from the Williamsburg Botanical Garden. And a big focus of the Stewardship Hour is that we not only learn, but we also take away some action steps that we can go out and do. So we like to think that, at the end of this half hour, you feel charged and ready to take some action on behalf of the environment in our county. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce to everybody Judith Alberts, who will be talking with us today. Judith, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I planted my first garden in many years. I moved from Chicago, landed here in Williamsburg, and the first thing I planted was milkweed. And I was an accidental gardener, but did not have a great deal of experience. So in 2017, I went through the Master Gardeners training through the Virginia Cooperative Extension. And I had already known about the Williamsburg Botanical Garden. I had discovered it early on in 2011. But the involvement through Master Gardeners in specific areas of the garden and our learning classes that were held in the garden really spoke to me. And so I started volunteering. And one thing has led to another, and here I am. Tongue in cheek, I refer to myself as the Grand Poobah. But it's a delightful garden. It's a labor of love for so many volunteers. You don't have to be a master gardener to be a volunteer. We have many who, can only come once in a while. They come on a specific task, but it is a delightful place. And it's kind of one of the hidden gems of Williamsburg. I run into people sometimes, and before COVID, would strike up a conversation, in the aisle at Michael's, and I'd say, "Oh, about the garden," and they would say, "We have a garden here in Williamsburg," and I go, "Yeah, it's really cool." But I think that we're expanding our reach in the community and our online footprint as people come in and out of the garden. I will stop and chat with anyone, masks usually in place, and although now those restrictions are easing up for us. And people are finding us online, coming from all over the country. And then there are people that I chat with and go, "Oh yeah, I come here every day," or "I come here every week. I love this place." It's like, "Oh, good. What's your name? Let's get you involved." And they are, I love hearing their stories about what the garden has meant to them, especially during this last year. Other places would be closed, but the garden is being part of Freedom Park, held within it. People found us, and it was a great place to come with children who had been stuck in front of a computer screen for the school day. And preschools were shut down, so we would see children of all ages coming in with their parents and grandparents, and it just became a respite of a place for quiet, for peace, and to look at pretty things. So that's the garden in a nutshell.
Nice. Thanks, Judith. So we are here today we're going to ask Judith some questions and have her enlighten us. And we're specifically going to talk about kind of 5 different categories of how we can get involved with sustainable gardening. And the first and probably the most intense topic is individual behavior change, how we can plan our gardens, how we can adjust to be more sustainable, etc. So sort of have some bullet points here, and I'm just going to ask Judith if you wanted to sort of say a few words to each one sort of as it comes up. If you have some information to add to it, that might be the best way to do this. So first up, we have learn about native plants and start replacing invasive species with natives that support the natural environment. And I don't know, Judith, if we have an example that we could, for example, that we could use.
Oh, yes. I've got plenty of examples. But first, let me explain why native plants are important and why invasives are so bad. And that is, over the millennia of change and climate and what's growing and insects that have evolved and that symbiosis, plants need to be eaten by insects. And insects need the plants for their larvae, for nectar. Let's just talk about the quote pollinators. And that's not just butterflies and bees and moths. It's all kinds of critters. And I am not an expert on bugs. But when an invasive species comes in, and I'm going to take, for example, the Asian or Japanese wisteria. It's beautiful, yes, it is. But it does produce nectar for bees and butterflies. But in our area, none of the insects have really adapted to using those leaves as their host plant. And I call the host plant the nursery. Think about children and how children are, they're born, they're raised, they're in a nursery at the beginning, and then they grow up, become adults, and that type of thing. Well, the host plant is the nursery for the caterpillars, the eggs and the hatching into caterpillars. And without those host plants, they cannot survive. So, take that foreign wisteria and replace it with the native American wisteria, and now you have several skippers, which is a kind of a subcategory. Well, they are types of butterflies, and they will lay their eggs on that. And so, yes, the plant, some of the leaves start disappearing, but that's as nature intended it to be. The larva droppings, which are called frass, then drop to the ground and become part of the enrichment of the soil. But then we have another generation of that particular species, and species of moths and butterflies and probably all insects are very specific as to which plants they'll lay their eggs on. There's a beautiful butterfly called the red admiral. It only lays its eggs on false nettle, which is not a terribly pretty plant, but it does great in the shade. It kind of becomes bushy, not too big. And it's a fabulous butterfly, but its numbers are falling because there's not as much false nettle. Take, the monarch butterfly, that whole migration cycle, what's actually happening is that the adults are, once they go through the winter in the mountains of Mexico, they are following milkweed as it's emerging in various parts of the country, in the Texas and that area, and then up and through the plains and into the southeast and up the coast and all of that on our side of the Rockies, they're following the milkweed as it pops up and grows. So, they are dependent on that cycle. And the monarch has become the poster child of butterflies. And I love the monarch. I mean, that's how I kind of got started in all of this. But there are so many other species that are very specific and are in decline for the reason of declining habitat for them. Another example of a very specific butterfly is the zebra swallowtail, which only lays its eggs on the pawpaw. And, how many people grow a pawpaw? Well, they kind of pop up here and there, and you'll see areas that are kind of left to go wild will have little stands of pawpaw, but it's not something that most gardeners go out and, I'm going to go get me some pawpaw today. So learning about that symbiosis is very important. But the other thing about invasive species is that they actually, because nothing's eating them, and insects have not adapted to eating them, they start multiplying and crowding out the plants that do support the wildlife. So, learning about that. And then one of the best ways to learn about native plants, there is a downloadable, wait a minute, I've got my virtual background, which makes it kind of funny. Hard to see, but this guide there's a free download, and I know that Emma has included the link to that and on some of the closing slides. So native plants, learning to appreciate them, even though they are less showy overall. They in some cases they're just not as beautiful. The meadow rose has a specific bloom time versus the hybrid rose that is just beautiful in what we think of as a rose. Learning to appreciate more of the natural approach to what beauty is. And yes, that next bullet point, learn to love imperfection. And I think I speak about this. I have a friend who is an excellent landscape designer, and she has spoken on many occasions, and she's well known in this area. Peggy Kropp, who says that sometimes she'll talk to a homeowner, and the homeowner tells her, "Oh yes, I want a butterfly garden, but I don't want any bees. I don't want." They don't understand that there has to be this give and take. And if you plant enough things that will be growing at different times and supporting, because the butterflies and moths, they have their own specific flight times. Many butterflies don't come out. We don't see them until later in the season because their host plant isn't ready for them yet early. So they emerge from their chrysalises and then start the reproductive cycle. And yes, your plants start getting a little nibbled, and but you have to learn to tolerate at least some imperfection. And some people say, "Oh no, something's eating my plant," and I say, "Yay, something's eating my plant." Now there are exceptions to that. Things like the gone absolutely blank on it. The Japanese beetles. That's obviously has become an invasive species, and that does nothing for the environment except truly defoliate your plants. But there's a way to deal with that. And this is one of my favorite topics, is to I do not use any chemicals in my yard whatsoever. I do not use pesticides. I will not use herbicides. A natural method of pest control, example for the Japanese beetles, If you go out early in the morning, and when they're not quite moving around too much yet because they're kind of waiting for the sun to warm up, but you look to see, where they are, and you take a jar of soapy water, just, dishwashing liquid, and you just knock them off. Just knock them off. Knock them off and let them drown. So that does not harm the plant. There are some plants that will tolerate a light spray mist of a soapy water. It has to be a very mild, like 1 part soap to about 20 parts water, and that sort of helps perhaps wash them away. And in terms of weed control, well, I personally feel that a lawn with clover and dandelions are a good thing, because that's diversity in what is otherwise a monoculture. And I understand people don't want that, but instead of using Roundup, just go ahead and snip it off before the dandelion becomes a seed head to avoid the spread. But the good thing about the dandelion is, well, not only can you make dandelion wine, I'm told, dandelions used to be a part of food culture. It has been used for various parts of food preparation. But the dandelion is, one of the earliest flowers that we see. And so early bees and other early insects can make use of that. Clover, I often see the little itty bitty tiny blue butterflies and smaller ones. They're on the clover, and I'm sorry to say, I don't remember which species it is of butterfly that actually lays its eggs in clover, in the seed head, in the bloom of the clover. The little tiny violets that pop up in our lawn, I love those guys. Before we mow, I will go and I will dig them up and transplant them, because there's another butterfly that uses those violets as their host plant. Now, you don't see those caterpillars because those caterpillars are very wily. They eat during the night and then crawl back down under the soil level to avoid predators during the day. So, just avoiding chemicals which are systemic. You think you're killing one particular bug, you're killing a lot more than one bug. They are not selective. Most of the time people are spraying for mosquitoes. Yeah, I understand mosquitoes are a problem, but that general overspray is so destructive for the habitat or for the cycle of all the other insects involved too. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but I have seen way fewer bees this year than I have in the last couple of years. It's been dramatic, and I'm not seeing a lot of butterflies yet. So all of these things that we've been doing as a matter of course, just, I want my lawn beautiful, I want my yard beautiful. Well, you cut down the population of one insect, you're cutting down the population of other insects that are considered pretty, our friends. All the insects are our friends, except Japanese beetles and Asian longhorn beetles and a few other, truly destructive things that don't belong in our environment. Which leads me to, let's rethink the lawn. Unless you are actually living on the golf course, I do not see the appeal of that perfect green monoculture lawn. There's nothing that it supports. Although I understand if you have children, you need them to have a place to play, and that's good. But when you reduce an area that, instead of a huge expanse, you could have a border, a segment, a wild area that is going to, number one, require less maintenance if you plant it with like a wildflower mix that just comes up and repopulates itself, but it's not going to need as much water. And so that goes back to this whole thing about sustainability. When we reduce water consumption, that's really good. It's good not only for the environment, but it cuts down on water bills, which I am going to say this is having lived in both Chicago and California. Let me tell you about California water bills. Our water bills are not terrible, but why spend money on watering a lawn if you can avoid it? If you have native plants, they can tolerate more dryness, more wetness. They are more tolerant of extreme conditions because they were designed, they've evolved to live in these live and grow in these conditions. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make with their lawns is they are over fertilizing. And I'm sure there are speakers from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science who will tell you all the damage that over-fertilization is doing and how it creates, algae blooms and various kill-offs and all of the things that it does to the Chesapeake Bay. So, avoiding over-fertilizing is tremendously important. And trees. Now, you're seeing behind me a photograph of the garden, and there are some wonderful trees in that area. Most people spend a lot of money on taking care of a tree, and because that's very important. They have to make sure if it's a big tree that it doesn't damage the house. But there are things that people do that are almost considered standard practice. And one of them is volcano mulching. You drive anywhere and you see these mounds of mulch around a tree. And that's not how a tree is supposed to live. Yes, you want to keep down weeds. You want to keep the mower from getting too close to the trunk. But that's not how to mulch. So this coming Saturday, the Learn and Grow program that the garden is doing is called Volcano Mulching and Other Tree Crimes. We have our speaker is Patsy McGrady, who is a master gardener, and a tree steward, which is a specialized training just about trees. And she's just a very knowledgeable person on that subject. So she'll be our guest speaker on Saturday. And Emma has put up the link. Thank you very much. And we do put all of our recordings up on our YouTube channel. So the big takeaway here is avoid planting invasives, and look when you're purchasing, look to see if the plant has been grown by the grower with what are called, I always stumble on this myself, neonicotinoids. That is a pesticide that invades the system from every part of the plant, from the roots to the stem, to the leaves, to the flowers. And a little story about purchasing something. I do raise butterflies, and the first year that I was raising black swallowtails, which feed on dill, fennel, parsley, Queen Anne's lace, anything in the carrot family. Well, all I had was dill. I was excited I actually watched the butterfly laying her eggs, and then these caterpillars just ate this dill down to nothing. And I panicked. Oh my goodness, I have all of these things. And I really didn't know anybody in the gardening community yet. So I went around and I happened to go to I went to Trader Joe's because I thought, okay, I think that this will be a good product. I wanted to make sure that it didn't have anything bad in it. Well, I was so wrong. I gave these caterpillars this dill, and within 15 minutes, the caterpillars had fallen off the plant and were twitching and died. And then I was appalled, and I turned it over, and I didn't see that it had been grown somewhere in South America, and obviously had systemic neonicotinoids in its growing cycle. And the interesting thing is that even some of the larger outlets, I'm not going to name any names, are adapting to marking plants that are grown with neonics or non-neonics. So avoid anything that's grown with neonicotinoids, and avoid invasives as much as possible. And these are things that we control in our gardens. And what I do in my garden, well, if my neighbor is continuing to spray for mosquitoes, that spray kind of drifts. So we have to kind of be environmental ambassadors across the board, as nicely as possible. And I understand how touchy that can be. That's kind of the size of that.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us to our next topic, really, is that just like what Judith was saying, all of those were our individual behavior changes, but it's not just that, 1 yard alone will make a difference. Everybody, in their own way makes a difference, but it's going to take a community effort to make these lasting important changes, so that we avoid things like you were saying, shortage of bees this year, not as many butterflies, which kind of leads us to our step 2, which is action 2 is volunteer action. And it's time to rethink the choices we make when we're setting up, a garden or a common area, and also the maintenance practices. So like the volcano mulching for trees, that should be thought through ahead of time before things are planned out. And there's sort of 3 areas that Judith has identified as places that we can go ourselves, depending on our comfort level and our experiences. One being homeowners associations, because it really is, imagine if your whole neighborhood were thinking the same way with no neonicotinoids. Woo!
I know, you can just say neonic.
Neonics. Or thinking through those choices before, during, and afterwards for your maintenance practices. Commercial properties, whether you work on a commercial property, or have a relationship with a commercial property, or manage a commercial property. And then there's government managed land as well. And if you're interested in helping make the horticultural choices, or having a say in the maintenance practices, we do have a list of volunteers we've been sort of accumulating as we do these stewardship hours. So if you are interested in maybe being someone that we can call to be a part of a committee to look things over and be a part of that conversation, then there's an exit ticket at the end of this presentation. And if you indicate that you're interested in helping to rethink those choices and maintenance practices, then I'll put you on that list of people we would contact if we get the opportunity to do that. And so I don't know, Judith, do you want to speak to anything on this slide about coming together?
I will. Now, the house in which I live is in a neighborhood that is not part of any association. However, I have experience being on a condo board, and we were a very small association, very small board, and we did not have a horticultural committee. But I look back at the things that we did, and my experience on a homeowners association was that we didn't know what we were doing. And I know that homeowners associations here are most likely larger boards and may have a specific committee that addresses those ground maintenances, and there's practices and who they hire. And it's important to, number one, work with a provider of those services who understands, the correct way to mulch a tree and the correct way to limb a tree and prune a tree, because these are things that the homeowner is not going to do in a common area. How they mow. And I understand, that time is money. So yes, they're going to have to use power tools, but some of these practices are very harmful for the environment. If you insist on using a weed whacker, maybe instead of using a gasoline-powered one, although it might not be practical, but battery-powered equipment is getting better and better. The things that are planted in common area borders, many of them are just things that are going to look good. And when they stop blooming, they tear them out and replace them with something else that looks good. One of the things, and I do not know how it started with mounting mulching around trees, but think about it. If you do it the right way, you're not going to need to add mulch every single time to that same amount. So the homeowners association is actually going to save money by doing less mulching and doing it the correct way. Mm. So, individuals who live in homeowners associations, I do realize that they are bound in some ways in terms of appearance. They may or may have, I've heard of rules, things like nothing over 5 feet can be next to your mailbox, or, just weird things that are purely cosmetic. And there are stories of other areas in the country, and I don't know if it's true of here, that milkweed, the host plant for the monarch butterfly, was banned from homeowners' yards by the homeowners association because it was called a weed. I mean, I'd love to start a campaign that changes the name to monarch milk plant instead of milkweed, so that that stigma of the name itself is taken away. So again, that is educating a horticultural committee and getting good advice from experts when making decisions on what will be planted in common areas and how it'll be maintained. For commercial properties, again, I realize it is a balance between appearance and practicality, but commercial properties can make the same changes that we're making. And if they plant correctly, they can maintain a succession of things that look pretty while other things die back and then come back next spring. And for government managed land, things like, how mowing is done along highways, at least during certain times of the year. Let's stop mowing down the milkweed that is growing along a grassy verge. So we can all do something.
Yeah. Our third action is to contact the powers that be. So I've identified 2 different petitions that if you feel so moved, you can check an action off your box that you did something, at least one little thing. These are 2 petitions that kind of address pesticides. So the first one is to ban the use of neonicotinoids. And it's a petition that would be sent to the United States Department of Agriculture. And then the other petition we have is to ban toxic pesticides, and it's put out there by the NRDC, the National Natural Resources Defense Committee. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting.
Yeah, sorry. And I know NRDC, but I have gone blank on it too.
I can never remember what the C is. Anyway, if you click on the link, you can read all about them and this this petition, but it's basically asking, petitioning that at a national level, these actions should be done to ban toxic pesticides.
And it's not just about the environment. It's also about how these things are affecting human health.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I thought about what that foreign dill did to caterpillars within 15 minutes, I was like, well, what are the things that I'm eating containing?
Right.
And, obviously many people do not have the means to buy organic in all cases. So, the more of this stuff that's in our plants, and they're talking about how, there are certain chemical pesticides and herbicides that are causing cancer.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening. This is, not something that I'm making up or that anybody's making up. It's real.
This is one of the many instances or examples where we can see that environmental justice and is social justice. They're very, it's linked. It's best for all of us. What's best for the earth is best for us, best for everybody. Absolutely.
Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you, Jennifer.
There we go. Thank you. I can't remember. Committee didn't seem right. Council. There we go. Our fourth action here is to support local. Typically, we talk about a business, but in this case, we wanted to give more highlight out to the Williamsburg area Botanical Garden, and they're like Judith said, located in Freedom Park. And correct me if I'm wrong, but open 7 a.m. till dusk.
Till dusk. So about every 2 weeks or so, I have to go onto Facebook and Yelp and Google and update the hours.
Whatever dusk
7 a.m. is standard, but I have a part of my calendar is sunset and sunrise, or sunrise and sunset times, and I'm guessing, okay, dusk is somewhere right around here.
And there's an email and a phone number too if you'd like to reach them. And Judith, is the plant sale with the honor box, is that something that's ongoing?
It will be ongoing through the end of May, and then and we will be announcing that we've just received native plants, a lot of native plants, but the plants are available. They're priced as marked, and if you bring cash or a check, there is an option to pay online, although we prefer the cash or check because there are no fees involved. And there are, right now, this morning, we consolidated all of the plants into a smaller area, but that'll be expanding again on Monday morning. So yes, the plant sale is going on through the end of May.
Great, yeah, so head on over there, get some awesome plants.
Yes, do.
And then the fifth action, of course, is to share the video of this Zoom with somebody you think might find this information useful or interesting. If you indicate on our exit ticket that you would like to get a copy of this presentation so that you can click on all the clickable links, or a copy of the Zoom link so that you can watch it again or share it with somebody, you just let me know in our exit ticket. I'm sending that right now in the chat. So if everybody present wouldn't mind opening that up, it's a SurveyMonkey link that I've put in there. There is a very small pop quiz. Make sure you're paying attention to Judith. And then there's a chance to sort of commit to action. So like I said, this is really an opportunity to commit to action. What kind of steps can you take to help sustainable gardening, not just in your own yard, but in our community? And so there's a chance there in that SurveyMonkey to check off what you personally will commit to. I think that psychologically it always helps me to say, pick the 4 or 5 things that I think I can reasonably do. We say a lot of great ideas, but then, let's set tangible, realistic goals for ourselves. Pick a few to really take seriously and drive all the way home. There's also, if you want a copy of this presentation, this lovely yellow page that is full of rich resources that Judith has shared. There's some some more information to go search some handouts, and then also some organizations you might want to visit to learn even more. And our next stewardship hour, we're now doing these every other month. So next time we'll be meeting in July, and we'll be talking about plastic reduction. So put it in your calendars. I've just learned today that we'll be switching to Microsoft Teams for our meetings instead of Zoom. So I'll make sure to communicate that early so we can all figure out what that means.
Emma,
everybody.
before we end entirely, could you go back one slide? And I just want to talk a little bit about those resources.
Absolutely.
Doug Tallamy is world renowned for his writing on conservation, and Nature's Best Hope was published in 2020, and it was very much a sequel to his groundbreaking, in many ways, book in 2009, Bringing Nature Home. And then I have just started reading A New Garden Ethic, and it is very much along those lines, along the same lines, saying that he's preaching the same sermon, but with different aspects that are really highlighted. So it's very complimentary. It's not just reading the same old thing. And that download for that book that I was trying to show, it's an excellent book. You can actually order a hard copy for yourself, but the free download is very helpful. And that's one of my go-to resources when I'm looking up a plant. And the John Clayton chapter of the Virginia Native Plant Society is a wonderful resource for information on their website, and they, as a member, attending meetings. And just let me say a little bit about the James City County Williamsburg Master Gardeners. It is part of the Virginia Cooperative Extension, and there are teams of people that will actually make home visits. Now, we have not been quite cleared for home visits in all cases, but if you have a question about trees, you can ask for a tree call, and tree stewards will come out to your home. We've got something funky on the bark of your blah, blah, blah. And they'll go, and if they don't know it, they'll look it up for you. If you have, one of the things that we often get are calls for master gardener teams to go out to someone's house, and that's called Landscape Love, where someone has just moved into the area, they have a new home, and they go, I don't know what these plants are. A team of master gardeners will come out and say, well, this is this is that, help identify in many cases, will give recommendations for things. If they see an invasive plant, they'll say, here's a better alternative to that. And it's a wonderful organization. All of these things are free. The help desk, which has been running virtually through email and phone since the pandemic shut down the office in Toronto, we have a mobile help desk on Saturdays through May. So there are 2 or 3 Saturdays left, where from 9 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there will be people at the Botanic Garden to answer your questions. And once again, if they don't know, they'll take it back, look it up, and email you or call you with the information you're looking for. So the Master Gardeners is a resource to be treasured and used. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. Does anybody have any questions before we sign off for the day? Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. This has been such a joy learning everything. I've learned neonicotinoids I can add to my vocabulary.
once you say it a few times, you get the hang of it. But thank you. It has been a pleasure and to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks so much for coming, Judith, and thanks everybody. And have a wonderful evening.